Hello, and welcome back to our final History of Communications presentation. And today's presentation is on the freedom of the press. So here is the table of contents, a list of what I will be talking about throughout this presentation. Starts with some vocabulary terms, and then it'll go into the introduction, general history, and then we'll go into the First Amendment, speech versus press, some ethics of freedom of press and journalism, the pros and cons of freedom of press, a couple real world examples, and then the conclusion and bibliography. So here are some vocabulary terms that will be just keep in the back of your mind while we're going through this presentation. The first is defamation, which is the action of damaging the good reputation of an individual, almost like bullying. Copyright, intellectual property that gives owner right to copy or distribute creative work for a specific period of time. And then there's invasion of privacy, which is the unjustifiable intrusion into the personal life of an individual without consent, which is very much illegal. Then we have licensing, which is the official permission or permit to do something. Next is prior restraint, which is the judicial suppression of material or imposed censorship. Then there's hate speech. Now, hate speech and fighting words are different. So, hate speech is the abusive or threatening speech that expresses prejudice against a particular group, while fighting words is the literal comment or statement. And then cannibalization is in this perspective, since there are multiple definitions for this particular presentation. Cannibalization is taking material from another news organization without attribution, almost like plagiarism. In the world of communication law, the First Amendment is considered a foundation. Freedom of speech and or expression allows all people the right to openly speak about ideas in any way. Communication law is the constitutional right of freedom of the press, political and personal, and explains how the adversarial legal system relies on various behaviors and constitutional rights. As for freedom of the press, it is a fundamental principle through expression via media, print, and electronic published materials. So, a little general history. The fundamental principle known as freedom of the press took the world of journalism by storm. While first adopted on December 15th, 1791, as one of the 10 amendments in the Bill of Rights, it declared a critical piece to democracy in which the government is held accountable to the people. Protected by the First Amendment, a free press is beneficial to the balance of power in the government, but is also dangerous and controversial in other places around the world. Unfortunately, numerous journalists have been killed for fulfilling this role. So, first, we're going to jump into the First Amendment itself. The First Amendment. Congress shall make no law limiting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or the press. So, this amendment guarantees freedoms concerning religion, expression, assembly, and the right to petition. It is up to the press alone to maintain independence within journalism. Obscenity, fraud, child pornography, and illegal conduct are a couple of aspects that are not protected. And a little fun fact is that the notion of the press is actually the fourth branch of the government. That's actually pretty cool. Next is speech versus press. So, freedom of speech is the principle that supports the freedom of an individual or community to articulate opinions or ideas without fear of legal sanction, meaning that whether online or within your community, you can say whatever you believe in or your opinion, and it's okay. Like, you have the right to say whatever it is you want to say. As for freedom of the press, it is a little bit similar, but there is a difference. So, freedom of the press is the right of newspapers and magazines to report, gather, or publish news without being controlled by the government, meaning that within these news articles, magazines, social media posts, that the people behind that, the writers, the journalists, they have the right to say these things or these opinions or beliefs, not so much opinions and beliefs, I take that back, but more so the news, and not get in trouble for it. During the American Revolution, the British government tried to censor the American media by prohibiting newspapers from publishing unfavorable information and opinions. And one of the first court cases involving this was in America in 1734, when William Cosby brought a libel case against the New York Weekly Journal publisher John P. Zinger for publishing commentary critical to Cosby's government. Zinger and Cosby did not like each other that much after that. Next, we will be going into the ethics of journalism as well as freedom of the press. So, the Society of Professional Journalism Code expresses that journalists have to follow these 6 main principles: truth, independence, compassion, accuracy, objectivity, and impartiality. A journalist must also subject to verification and fairness to any news and or report, meaning that if they say something or write something in their work, they have to stand by that. They can't just, flip flop or write something that they don't genuinely believe in. As plagiarism in the modern writing world is bad, in journalism and political writing, cannibalization is worse. I will say that there are a couple of definitions regarding cannibalization. One is like traffic cannibalization, which is when you pull your audience in more than one direction and you don't know what you're talking about. And then in economics, it's more of a marketing strategy. Another inappropriate concept is we will question everybody else. We will not subject ourselves to anybody's questions. Journalists must be held accountable for what they write and post online. Journalists do not have the right to harass or use invasive tactics that could be harmful to anybody. Next is a list of some pros and cons. So a few pros is actually a quote from Alexis de Tocqueville, and it is: "The sovereignty of the people and the liberty of the press may therefore be looked upon as correlative institutions, just as censorship of the press and universal suffrage are two things which are irreconcilably opposed." Freedom of the press is highly important around election time, for this is when the people need extensive and reliable information regarding political parties. If, there's someone running for mayor and, they need the right to express and say what they need to say to persuade people to vote for them. This also contributes to more open debate and responsibility in public health, disseminates information among citizens, improves the workings of government, provides communication between citizens and government, and citizens themselves can bear witness to the attention of their rights being violated if they are. Now, some cons are the lack of freedom within the press can lead to a paranoid and informed society. Concepts such as phone tapping and installation of recording devices are not tolerated. This goes back to journalism ethics. Countries with limited press freedom also rank highly on the corruption scale. Another con is there's blindness and ignorance and the risk of fake news. An example of this is when the press turned Michael Jackson into a villain and no court could prove that he was any kind of, bad person, but the press made it look like that he was. Freedom of the press is a crucial element and cornerstone of any free society. That is a quote from Students for Liberty. And another quote from James Comey is, just because you're talking about something frequently doesn't mean you know what you're talking about. And that's in correlation with fake news. Next, we'll be going into the real world examples, or more so in the industry itself. So the first one is Freedom of the Press Foundation. This is a quote from Judge Murray Griffin when he was doing the Pentagon Papers case on June 17th, 1971. A cantankerous press, an obstinate press, a ubiquitous press must be suffered by those in authority in order to preserve the even greater values of freedom of expression and the right of the people to know. So, this foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that protects, defends, and empowers public interest journalism in the 21st century. This organization's mission is to preserve and strengthen the First and Fourth Amendment rights. And just a quick little recap: the Fourth Amendment is the one that says like it prohibits unreasonable searches within homes or properties without a warrant. And then the mission is to development of encryption tools, training newsrooms, digital security practices, documentation of attacks on the press, and then advocating for public's right to know. The six foundations of this particular foundation to ensure journalism safety: their secure drop, digital security trainings, U.S. Press Freedom Tracker, encryption tools and special projects, news and advocacy, and crowdfunding. The second foundation is called Common Cause. Their motto is to know that the ultimate power in democracy is the people. Founded in 1970 with 4,000 core members, this company is a nonpartisan organization with roots dedicated to upholding the core values of the American democracy. Common Cause's principle is that all individuals agree the process of free press is fair, produces equitable results, and reflects positivity in communities, values, and priorities. Their sister organization, Common Cause Education Fund, is to build public engagement with democratic issues and to promote impactful citizenship participation for a healthier society. Lastly is Students for Liberty, and this quote was pulled from the Students for Liberty website. Liberty creates a better world, and our messages surrounding the ideas are welcoming, positive, and inspiring. This company is the largest pro-liberty student organization in the world in terms of leaders, represented countries, and events. One principle this foundation stands by is engagement in civil discourse over how to promote freedom from all aspects of life. And a few article headlines that are found within this website include anti-war, socialist economics, free market economy, immigration reform, and so much more. So here is the impact via numbers. So Students for Liberty has 50 million views on almost all their educational videos online. There's 4 Student for Liberty alumni listed on the Forbes 30 Under 30 list, 93 organizations started by these alumni, and then 11 Student for Liberty alumni have been elected to public office. In conclusion, freedom of the press is more than freedom of speech. It is the ultimate, fundamental right and protection of not just journalists, but for all those posting online about their beliefs and or opinions. In other countries, one could go to prison just for speaking out, or even physically harm a journalist in doing so. It is up to nonprofit organizations such as Common Cause and Students of Liberty to help and make sure that these individuals are protected by the law. The First Amendment is the root of all of this. making sure that these organizations exist without prejudice. So that is all I have for you today. This is the bibliography slide 1. Bibliography slide 2. I did a lot of research. So there's about 10 sources listed on these 2 slides. But thank you so much for watching. And to all that watched my History of Communication series, thank you so much for sticking around. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye bye.